Thanks to all of you for coming on this wonderful day. It's almost that spring is knocking at the door, and I was worried that nobody would show up. But we have these endless lines in Russ and Daughters, and I went down there for all the people who are waiting to have brunch and told them to come up. So I think many of you are not familiar with what's going to happen here today. This is a conference with museum curators and directors. And anyway, my name is Jens Hoffmann, and I'm the deputy director here at the Jewish Museum. I would like to welcome you on this very sunny and beautiful day to the Symposium Unorthodox on Museums, which we are presenting in the framework of the exhibition Unorthodox, which is taking place in the first floor galleries. And I hope all of you have the chance, if you haven't already, to see the exhibition. So before I begin my introduction to today's symposium, I would like to take this opportunity to thank a number of people who have made this conference possible. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Edmund de Rothschild Foundation, who has been incredible in supporting this partnership and the entire Unorthodox program. The foundation adopted the idea very early on, actually when we were still in the very early stages of our thought process for Unorthodox. And through their generosity, they made not only the exhibition, but also the publication, which is here, and you can buy this in the museum shop, but also the talk series possible. So many thanks to Edmund de Rothschild Foundation. I would also like to thank Jenna Weiss, our public programs manager. Thumbs up. Jenna has spearheaded the organization of all the public programs and the talks, and some of you might know the talk series was organized together with the 19th Street Y. And many thanks for the hard work, particularly on today's program. I would also like to thank Bruce Altschuler, the chair of the Museum Studies program at New York University, which is co-presenting today's symposium, and Bruce is also going to moderate the first panel. My sincere thanks also go to Kelly Texter and Daniel Palmer, who are my co-curators for the exhibition Unorthodox. And the exhibition has been an amazing testing ground for many of our ideas, and I hope that some of those ideas will enter today's conversations. It's been a great adventure, and I think we're actually already starting to think about Unorthodox too, or even more unorthodox, as I like to call it. And as always, my deepest gratitude goes to our fearless director, Claudia Gould, and the board of the Jewish Museum for letting the curators here at the Jewish Museum do all the things that we want to do. It's not often that one finds such supportive and inspiring directors and trustees in museums that allow for such a high degree of unconventional curatorial experimentation. So many thanks to all of you. The field of art is generally believed to be an open and enlightening place, full of creativity, full of autonomy, and full of free-flowing energy. While that can be true in some small parts of it, the reality is that artists' creative compulsions and productive itches are regularly subject to innumerable rules, mindless bureaucracy, and countless regulation codes and conventions, which together constitute a system that often dictates how art is made and how art is viewed and displayed. A similar standardization of imaginative impulses can be found in the way curators and museum directors conceive their programs, exhibitions, and how they handle interpretation of art for visitors, and how they carry out the displays and the didactics. But rather than to wallow in lamentations of the general risk aversion of museums, a more productive path forward must surely be to ask how to do an exhibition that is all about experimentation. One that does not affirm what is already recognized and accepted, but that tries to explore the unknown, embraces the unconventional, examines the eccentric, and applauds the provocative, irritating, and sometimes even the bizarre. One question that I've asked myself while working on Unorthodox is whether structures and rules are actually a necessary foundation for the discussion about art and exhibition making, its history and its future. How can we possibly think about art, judge art, without criteria in place to guide our thoughts? And this is where the story becomes interesting, but also complicated, because it leads us to ask who establishes those criteria, how are they instituted, and what are they based on? That those standards can reflect and perpetuate political, and social agendas and manifest geopolitical hierarchies is nothing new. For decades now, luckily, and propelled by critical theory, identity politics, feminism, post-colonial theory, among many other frameworks, the dominant canon of art has been under constant attack. It has been unmasked, as we know, as a Eurocentric, chauvinistic accumulation of authoritative and ideological biased injustices and prejudices that are camouflaged as objective truths about what it is that has to go into museums and what is of everlasting importance to humans, or not. The history of art, time and time again, has been marked by moments when customs and traditions became so overbearing and societal changes so accelerated that a fundamental break with established norms necessarily erupted. The many radical art movements of the early 20th century, from Futurism to Dada to Surrealism to Constructivism, provided important precedents for continued spirit opposition to traditional forces. In the post-war era, as you all know, similar refusals to conform to conventions of mass culture were formulated by situationism, fluxus, and also conceptual art. Yet, as we know, the fate of many of those movements was to be canonized and thereby stripped of their radicalism. The history of the avant-garde is sadly also the history of how highly progressive artistic tendencies have been co-opted one by the establishment and arguably robbed of their radical potential. Unorthodox emerged out of a discussion looking at the aforementioned issues about what can be done to counter this, to examine this, to investigate it, to think about these questions in a time when the process is more accelerated than ever before. When even the most progressive artistic practices are immediately swallowed by the cultural industry and lose their capacity to be provocative. At the same time, I want to resist the temptation, and unfortunately it happens to me a lot, to indulge in the same old complaints regarding the state of the art world today, the over-commercialization, the decline of art education, and the bureaucracy. To stage an exhibition entitled Unorthodox in the context of the Jewish Museum might seem provocative, as it clearly refers to the inversion of a term used frequently in the discussion about Jewish faith and identity. Given the wide range of Jewish religious and cultural convictions, is it possible for a conversation around terms such orthodox and unorthodox in the context of a Jewish institution that tries to take an open, neutral, and unbiased position, as much as that is possible, in regards to religion and politics, and to avoid stepping onto a minefield? It is therefore essential to make clear that the title, and this is something we've discussed at length here in the museum, it is essential to make clear that the title does not refer to a critique of religious orthodoxy specifically, but rather to orthodoxies in the plural, meaning anything and everything that is generally accepted within a wide range of cultural, social, and political contexts. Art, after all, as we know, can be a brilliant means to probe previously unquestioned truths, to allow unorthodox concepts to infiltrate all sorts of established systems. Part of what makes working as a curator or a museum director so fascinating and yet so challenging is the fact that in some ways anything goes. And yet there's still endless rules, obstacles, and barriers controlling one's every move. Today we will hear from some of the most respected curators working in New York City. And only 2 international curators, museum directors, because Adrian Petrosa unfortunately couldn't make it. We hear from them about their thoughts in respect to what museums should be doing in a time when the entire system of the visual arts seems to be outdated, and we are confronted with an enormous amount of social, political, and cultural problems that need our urgent attention. The question I have is whether or not we are leaning comfortably back and continue with business as usual, or if we all are going to take responsibilities, take risks, and try to bring to society what is desperately needed: education, equality, tolerance, and the receptiveness to new ideas. So now, please join me in welcoming Vasif Kortun, director of SALT in Istanbul, and a long-time friend of mine and inspiration for many years, who's going to do the first presentation. Thank you very much.